Chapter 21. Aguilar landed gracelessly and hard, hissing in pain, and pressing a hand to his side as he got to his feet and ran down the tunnel. Torquemada, though, had alerted his soldiers, and the way up ahead suddenly grew bright with pools of lights from above, as Templars dropped down ahead of and behind Aguilar in an attempt to block his path. The assassin had moved beyond alarm or even strategy. Without slowing, he snapped his wrists and activated his blades, running headlong into the first surprised soldier and dispatching him with an almost mechanical rhythm. When the second one dropped down, Aguilar simply raced, not toward him, but toward the wall, running up it and launching himself into a roll on the packed earth, completely bypassing the Templar who swung his sword ineffectually. Aguilar was on his feet and racing down the tunnel again before the Templar had even fully turned. He knew that the secret was to not stop, at all. His task was to simply outrun the pain. 2 more Templars appeared in his path. One of them carried a torch to light the way. Now he shoved it toward Aguilar's face, thinking to burn him or blind him. The assassin ducked and came up swinging to knock the torch out of his enemy's hands, catching it deftly. He thrust the fiery thing into the face of the Templar's companion, who screamed, and sliced the throat of the one who'd originally been the torchbearer. He heard noise behind him and tossed the still-burning torch at them before again hurtling down the tunnel. Light was up ahead, not a single pool that indicated a cover had been lifted off the floor above, but a flood of it. Aguilar realized that he was almost out. Up ahead was a drawbridge. As Aguilar surged past the pulleys that controlled it, he slashed the ropes with his blade. The bridge started to lower. Aguilar ran up the wooden drawbridge as if it were a ramp and leapt off it onto the narrow stone bridge that led to the mountains and his freedom, striking the stone with his shoulder and rolling, absorbing the impact. He shot to his feet and froze, blinking in the bright sunlight. They were waiting for him. He heard those who had been in pursuit slow behind him, their breath heavy, their feet scuffling on the stone. Up ahead on the bridge stood at least 24 more, all armed with shields and spears. On the ramparts, crossbowmen had taken position. And standing in the centre, smirking down at his enemy, was Tomás de Torquemada. The Grand Inquisitor's robes were saturated with blood, but the joy of his victory at last was clearly chasing away the pain for the moment. Aguilar looked about, catching his breath, trying to find some escape route. There was none. Templars stood ready to obey their leader behind, before, and above him. 300 feet below, the uncaring Genil River raged, uninterested in the fate of any humans above it. Aguilar was well and truly caught, and Torquemada knew it. "It's over, assassin!" he cried, shouting to be heard above the rush of the river. He extended his hand, inviting Aguilar not to simply hand him the apple, which he was too far away to do, but to join him. All could be forgiven once the Templars had won this ultimate prize. Aguilar could live out his days in a prison cell with food, fresh water and wine, and any comforts he desired. Torquemada smiled gently, reassuringly, as a trusted father of the cloth should do. Aguilar smiled back. And then he leapt. "Assassin!" Torquemada's furious, despairing cry followed Aguilar as he plunged downward to the tumbling green-blue water, his ankles together, his arms spread. Templar crossbow bolts followed him down as well, singing past his ears like angry wasps. One struck home. Aguilar grunted, his form thrown off as he lurched from the pain. The surface of the water was racing to meet him. He threw a dagger to break the surface tension, then turned his body in mid-air so he would strike feet first, and Cal landed perfectly, like an acrobat. Like an assassin. The animus arm itself, however, seemed unprepared for the dramatic contortions performed by the subject in its 2-fingered grasp. It twisted on itself, and with a disturbing, whirring, grinding noise, something snapped. It disconnected its grip from Cal's waist, undulated for a moment, then hung limply like a dead thing. "Arm disabled!" exclaimed Alex, alarmed. "Actuator rupturing!" Cal was down on his right knee, his right hand on the floor beside his foot, his left hand raised. He was as still as if he had been carved in stone, or had been caught and held, frozen in this moment. Sophia seemed oblivious to the dire news about the animus arm, instead stepping forward slowly, almost enraptured. "A leap of faith," she whispered, gazing down at the still form. Musa was in his room, waiting for the guard to come and escort him to the common room. The guard was late doing so, which told him that the attack on Lynch had not been successful. While they had all been in agreement at the poker table, Musa had chosen not to be involved, yet. If all of them were involved in the single attack, and it went south, they would lose any opportunity for a second chance. Obviously, he'd been right. And now that the initial attack had failed, something, maybe Baptiste, was telling him that eliminating this intense, blonde man who preferred steak to chicken might not actually be the right thing, and he always paid attention to his instincts. He would be with his companions again shortly, and he would discuss what they had seen. For no reason whatsoever, a chill ran along his spine. Gooseflesh erupted. In Musa's mind, Baptiste opened one eye. When Musa was a boy, his grandfather, dark eyes both twinkling and serious, had told him that whenever he got goosebumps, it meant someone was walking on his grave. "Somebody's walking on somebody's grave," Musa murmured, and instantly went on high alert. Lynn had spent some time in solitary for her participation in the attack on Lynch, but the guards told her they were releasing her for an hour, under observation, in the common room if she continued to behave herself. "My ribbons," she had said forlornly. "May I dance with my ribbons still?" The Abstergo Foundation, she and the others had learned early on, was big on constructive activities and artistic expression. That meant, when Lynn had displayed a fondness for dancing with ribbons, they had been inclined to permit her to continue, just as they encouraged Emir to tend his garden. Yes, she was told, she was free to dance with her ribbons, and Lynn smiled and looked content and vacuous. She was the first they had released, though Emir and Musa soon joined her. They did not ask about Nathan. Duncan Walpole's descendant had come close to killing Lynch. Common room time would of course be withheld. But they had a plan for that. Xiao Jun was always just a whisper away in Lin's mind, but Lin always felt the strongest connection to her ancestor when she danced. Dr. Ricken had told her that, unfortunately, she had to insert the agonizing epidural so that the arm could move her to match her ancestor's movement. It's called neuromuscular facilitation, muscle memory, she had explained to Lin, and Lin had found it to be a useful thing. Xiao Jun had been born into slavery and was raised to become a concubine of the Zhengda emperor. She had become his favorite when she was in her early teens, but only for her dancing, her acrobatics, and her ability to spy on his enemies. Upon the emperor's death, Xiao Jun's spying talents enabled her to discover the existence of the assassins, and the Templar leadership in China, a group of ambitious eunuchs called the Eight Tigers. Now Lin's fingers grasped the thick red ribbons she had been forced to fasten to cardboard paper towel tubes. They were the only object deemed safe. It didn't matter. She had no jian, and no means to recreate Jun's unique weapon, the hidden footblade. And of course, after the earlier incident, they would not permit her to access anything that could be crafted into throwing darts. But she had her body, and that would be enough. She walked out to an open area in the common room and began to dance. Strong, fit and lithe to begin with, she had learned the movements of the ribbon dance, birthed in the Tang dynasty from Jun, who was a master at it. As she posed and swirled, bending and kicking, the red ribbons flowing like animated streams of blood in breathtaking circles and undulations about her frame, Lin was accomplishing two things. 1. Connecting with her ancestor, and 2. Providing a distraction. Unlike Baptiste and Walpole, Jun had no stain upon her name. She had lived a long, full life, achieving the role of mentor among the assassins. She had never turned to the Templars for money or greed or fear. June and Lynn hated Templars. But all was well. Soon, the assassins would go tiger hunting. "What's happening?" Sophia demanded. She couldn't take her eyes from Cal. A parade of horrible scenarios was crowding into her imagination, and she forced them away. Fear wouldn't serve her. Facts would. "He's gone dark." Samir's voice was higher than normal. She too was struggling against unhelpful fear. "Why have we lost him?" She paused, then asked, "Is Aguilar dead?" The animus had shown her the famous assassin leap of faith before. Their genetics were extraordinary, and Sophia knew that. But she also knew that the bridge off which Aguilar had leapt was taller by about 50 feet than San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, and Aguilar had been so badly injured for so long. What would being in Aguilar's memories at the time of his death have done to Cal? Had they come all this way for nothing? Had Aguilar in the end failed? Had she, Sophia, failed both the Templar Order and Callum Lynch? She could not decide which fate would be worse. "No," Alex said after checking Cal's brainwave pattern. "He's alive. Synchronization resuming." Sophia had not taken her eyes off Cal, who was still kneeling on the floor, and at the news she felt both relieved and confused. This shouldn't be happening. Her father's voice floated down from his office, saying the words that couldn't be true, but were. "He's controlling it." Sophia's eyes widened. This wasn't possible. No one had ever been able to wrest control of a simulation from her. But now, at last, Cal moved, slowly lifting his head to stare directly, and Sophia knew her father was right. "Status?" she inquired, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Back in," Alex assured her, pleased and relieved. Cal rose and stood in a relaxed but ready posture. The simulation began to take shape around him. She could now make out the silhouettes of ships and sails. "Where are we?" "It looks like a military port," Alex answered. Ghost vessels took shape around Cal's unnaturally rigid, still body. Visible but translucent and only faintly coloured. "The architecture's Andalusian." A suspicion began to form in Sophia's mind, taking shape imperfectly and unclearly, like the port city the animus was constructing around them. She tamped it down. She was a scientist, and she would wait for more facts. But the theory hovered, tantalizing. Perfect. "Elevation?" Sophia asked, her eyes flickering from the phantom vessels to Cal. 11 meters, Alex answered. "Gulf of Cadiz, Palos de la Frontera." Her suspicion deepened. "The boats. They don't look like warships," Alex mused. He scanned the holograms and added, "They're 70 feet by 20. Lateen sails. Ah, they're caravels, used for exploration." Cal was no longer present. He was seeing through Aguilar's eyes, looking up, and Sophia caught the spectral image of a holographic bird soaring overhead. Chapter 22. Aguilar sat in the hold of the ship, gazing up through a slatted wooden frame at the eagle overhead, and envied it fiercely. He was exhausted, filthy, and wounded in body and spirit. He had been travelling for 5 days, fighting off infection, taking odd routes, walking and stealing horses to throw any Templars off the scent. But he was alive, for the moment at least, and he was here. Food had been spread out before him, but he touched nothing, and when the captain of the ship entered, Aguilar did not rise. "Assassins died for this," he said bluntly. The captain did not move, simply stood quietly at the end of the table, as if Aguilar were the master of the vessel, not he. "Protect it with your life." "I am a friend of the creed," the bearded, slender captain assured him. Sophia's eyes narrowed. She had grown up all over Europe, and she knew her own accent reflected her upbringing. Able to speak 3 languages fluently, she had an ear for accents, and she knew at once that this unknown captain was not a native Spanish speaker. Slowly, Aguilar extended his hand. In it, he bore the apple of Eden. The captain reached to accept it from him, but before he could do so, Aguilar added, "Take it to your grave." The captain paled beneath his tan, but he met the assassin's eyes. "I swear," he said, his fingers curled around it securely, "following the light of the sun, I shall leave this old world behind." Sophia stood, rooted to the spot, as Alex provided the translation. "I shall leave this old world behind," she repeated. The words confirmed what she had almost dared not believe. "It's Christopher Columbus," she breathed. And then Aguilar's words to the captain took on a sudden, powerful new meaning. "Where is he buried?" Alex understood the import of her question. He was the most unruffled person she had ever known, seemingly born with the quintessential British stiff upper lip, but she noticed sweat gathering on his hairline as he quickly searched the Animus database. "His remains were returned to Spain," Alex said. "His tomb is in Seville Cathedral." Sophia stared at the images on the screen. "We found it," she breathed. It was time. Musa absently bounced the orange ball on the floor, then made a perfect shot. Scooping up the basketball, he bounced it a few more times, then rolled it from one hand to the other and behind his back as he assessed the situation. Over in the greenhouse area, Emir was busy repotting rosemary and gave Musa a casual glance over his shoulder. "Rosemary, that's for remembrance." Some snatch of a poem or something long gone, but it made Musa smile. Several others were sitting at the tables, eating placidly. Behind Musa, Lynn was doing Jun's ribbon dance. Since the confrontation, there were more guards on the floor than usual. The dance was beautiful and provided an excellent distraction. While 2 guards watched Lynn, Musa called out cheerfully to 2 others. "Hey, all stars! Care for a little 2-on-1? In days past, before the arrival of the pioneer, the guards had been more complacent. 1 or 2 of them had usually obliged him. But today, Musa could smell the tension on the air. He could feel it, singing along his veins. Something very big was going down, so today the guards simply stared at him. One of them narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Musa had mustered sleight of hand long ago, or had that been Baptiste? He had forgotten, and in the end, it didn't matter. Certainly not now. He tossed the ball down behind him, and his hands came up, fists clenched but palms down. "Pick one," Musa invited. The guards were used to his games, but this time they didn't play. "Anyone," he encouraged. When they did not, Musa shrugged, lifted his hands, and hurled the pair of smoke bombs he had stolen from Sophia Rickin's office to the floor. Their exquisitely wrought filigree glass exteriors shattered, and a wall of smoke surged upward. Lynn instantly executed a graceful flying leap into the churning grey cloud. Her foot connected with the guard's abdomen, and he doubled over, vomiting. Musa snatched the baton that fell from the guard's fingers and cracked him over the head with it. As the guard fell to the floor, Musa whirled, taking out the second guard the same way. It was Emir's turn now. His plants abandoned, he had positioned himself by the main entrance into the common room. Alarms blared stridently, and ugly red flashes disrupted the cool blue of the lighting and the soft dove grey of Musa's smoke bombs. The door burst open. 4 more guards, batons at the ready, raced in to assist their fellows in quelling this latest uprising. Emir waited until the last possible second, then darted forward, seized the last guard by the back of his neck as if he were nothing more than an errant puppy, and slammed him face first into the wall. The guard slid down to the floor, leaving a trail of red smeared on the concrete. His escape unnoticed thanks to the concealing, eye-stinging billow of smoke, Emir turned to the corridor toward the surveillance room, breaking into a run. Unlike Musa and Nathan, Emir's assassin ancestor had been someone he had been proud to be descended from. Far from being a traitor to the Brotherhood, Yusuf Tazim, born in 1467, had been a friend to one of the greatest assassins of all time, Ezio Auditore da Firenze, even giving that famous man one of his trademark weapons, an exceedingly useful device called a hook blade. Emir had grown up without family around him. His earliest memories were of foster homes, shunted from one to the other while uncaring so-called parents pocketed money intended for his upkeep. Yusuf, too, had grown up without knowing his father and had a similar unsavory early life. But at 17, he had attracted the attention of Ishak Pasha, the leader of the Ottoman Brotherhood of Assassins. It was a family, and as Yusuf grew, he became almost a parent to the younger members he taught. Warm, with an excellent sense of humour, Yusuf was everything Emir wanted to have in his life, wanted to do with his life. The Templars had put him in the animus for their own ends, but Emir wondered if they understood that, strangely, they had also given him a gift by introducing him to this noble man. Yusuf had died at the then respectable age of 45, exactly as he would have wished, defending an innocent against the hated Templars. Emir was only in his mid-30s. He had no idea if he would live to be 100 or if he would die sometime within the next few minutes. He did know that if, as he now suspected, this pioneer was the one they had been waiting for, should he die defending Callum Lynch, Emir would deem that death as satisfying as the one Yusuf had been granted. As they had anticipated, Musa and Lynn's distraction had worked. The surveillance room's door was unlocked. Most of the guards had been dispatched, and only 3 remained in the surveillance room. McGowan was nowhere to be seen, which was an unlooked-for gift. That one would have been a challenge to take down. Fools, Emir thought. The 3 guards who were left behind were all focused on their monitors of other places in the facility, the common room, the animus room, and the corridors down which their fellows were racing, to even notice as Emir walked right in. One of them finally spotted him and charged, lifting her baton. Emir seized her arm and twisted hard. He felt something snap. She grunted and paled, but her other hand rose and came close to colliding with his jaw before he knocked it out of the way and punched her instead. Her nose crunched beneath his fist, and a stiff-handed blow to the throat removed her as a threat. She collapsed to the floor. The second came at him. Emir sent him reeling back with a powerful kick to his chest, snatching up his baton and using it to first knock its owner out and then to crush the trachea of the final remaining guard. It had taken him less than 30 seconds to incapacitate the guards and gain control of the heart of security at the Abstergo Foundation. Emir shook his head in contempt and set to his task. The ones who had claimed Yusuf's life had at least been competent. He bent over one of the screens, tapping it to get a map of the compound, clicked on the common room, and then began opening the cell doors one by one, starting with Nathan's. Musa and Lynn were holding their own, even though at least a dozen, perhaps 2 dozen, it was a bit hard to tell with the smoke, Musa mused, armed guards had charged in once the smoke bombs had done their job. Lynn in particular fought the hated Templars like a caged tiger set loose. She leapt, spun and kicked like the entire thing was a choreographed dance performance, a ballet of blood. Her small frame made the bulkier armed guards underestimate her, which she used to her advantage. Musa, meanwhile, snatched up weapons that the unconscious or dead guards no longer needed and shared the crossbows and batons. He kept one eye on the main door, and when he saw it start to descend, he shouted out to his companions. They immediately turned and raced through it as it lowered. Musa waited till the last minute to make sure as many as possible had gone first, and then he dove for the narrowing space between the floor and the bottom of the heavy metal door, sliding under it just in time. Lynn helped him to his feet, both of them relishing the sound of the trapped guards futilely pounding on the wrong side of the door. "Looks like the inmates are running the asylum," he said, and grinned. Chapter 23. Sophia was vaguely aware that something was going on outside the confines of the animus room. Perhaps a second attack from the patients. She'd been told that there had been an earlier attempt on Cal today. It had been readily handled. If this was another one, it was none of her concern. She would leave that to McGowan. Her focus, her attention, her entire being, right at this moment, was focused on Callum Lynch. The previous scene had dissolved, the holographic images of ships and sails and Christopher Columbus simply fading into nothingness. That much was normal. But Cal stood, still synchronized in the animus itself, although the maneuvering arm was disabled, the insectoid epidural unit still jammed into his brainstem. And he was not alone. Aguilar de Neja stood with him, beside him and slightly in front of him. They stared into one another's eyes, and Sophia realized that they were actually seeing each other. How is this possible? Slowly, Aguilar nodded and stepped back. Cal looked around the room. Companions, assassins all, were taking shape. One was a soldier in a U.S. uniform circa 1943. Another wore the olive uniform of a World War I doughboy, although a hood covered his head, not the distinctive round helmet. A third was clad in the navy coat of a Union officer. Back they went, spanning first decades, then centuries. A French revolutionist, then one from America's Revolution. Sophia's stunned eyes took in clothing from the English Civil War, everything from formal ruffs and the sweep of a cavalier cape to peasants' tunics and roughly made leather armor. Is it a memory? Sophia's voice was an awed whisper, barely audible, but Alex heard her. He stared at Cal's brain patterns, then said, "No." He offered nothing further. Assassins were springing from Cal's DNA. His mind or his conscience, she was utterly unable to tell which. "He's projecting images of the Brotherhood," she said, stunned. "How is this possible? What's Cal doing?" He was crashing through all the limits they had thought bound the animus, as if what should have been inviolable laws of science were nothing more than guidelines. Sophia had been standing beside Alex, looking over his shoulder, but as more and more of the holographic assassins joined their brother, she too felt drawn to step out onto the floor and stand beside them. They were so clear, so real as her imaginary friends had been to her when she was a child, lost and alone, unspeakably lonely. She moved among them, looking into their faces. With what Cal was showing her now, what couldn't they accomplish going forward? The thought was intoxicating. Another figure stepped into the circle of assassins, one who would be dead if the figures were not holographic. Her father. He was gazing at the holographic figures as well, analyzing, assessing. His brown eyes met hers, and all her joy and wonder turned to ash at his expression. He would not be congratulating her on her achievement of a goal the Templars had spent over 30 years pursuing. He would not tell her how proud he was, would not raise a glass of his expensive cognac in a toast to her. Perhaps such acknowledgments would come later, though she doubted it. For now, in her father's mind, what was unfolding in front of them was not so much a breakthrough as a problem. "Transport," he said, not to her but to McGowan, who stood behind him. "Standing by," McGowan replied, his voice, as ever, flat and cold. Sophia's eyes widened at the words. She became more aware of her surroundings, of the blaring klaxons announcing a security breach, but she couldn't believe that it was this serious. There was one guard per patient, and that included the guards in the so-called infinity room, whose charges were utterly and completely harmless. Surely, her father wasn't suggesting leaving. Not now, not when Cal was... "He's given us what we want," Rickon said. "Protect the animus and purge the facility." "No!" The word exploded from Sophia before she even realized she had spoken. She stood staring at him, shaking with fury, her hands clenched tightly into fists. She knew what that meant. It meant that her father and everyone he deemed important would, in a doubtlessly calm and orderly fashion, get into waiting helicopters and depart, leaving the guards behind to kill every single one of the inmates, including Callum Lynch. It was meant to be a last resort, something to enact if there were to be a disaster and immediate departure was the only chance of survival. That wasn't the case here, and Rickon knew it. Her father didn't like what he saw when he looked at Cal, and at the myriad assassins Lynch had conjured up. He didn't like it at all. As far as Alan Rickon was concerned, Cal had given them what they wanted, the location of the apple, and now he was disposable, even a possible danger. The decades-long experiment, which she, Sophia Rickon, had taken to its ultimate successful conclusion, was being closed down. Cal had served his purpose. The inmates had served their purpose. The facility itself, other than the animus, had served its purpose. And Sophia couldn't help but wonder if she too had served hers in her father's eye. His gaze slid to hers, hard, annoyed. McGowan said, as if Sophia had said nothing at all, "I need to get you out of here first." "No!" Sophia shouted again. She took a step toward him, her face flushed with anger. Rickon strode toward her. No, not toward her. He strode past her, not even bothering to turn his head as he called back, "We have to leave, Sophia." It wasn't a protest or an argument. Alan Rickon was chastising her. Mortification washed over her hotly, followed by fury. Even now, when she challenged him over the deliberate murder of 50 people, some of whom weren't even sufficiently in touch with reality to comprehend that they were being threatened, he dismissed Sophia as if she were 4 years old and clinging to the leg of his trousers, crying over a dropped ice cream cone. He clearly expected her to follow, like a dog to heel. She didn't. Joseph Lynch stood in the infinity room. Lights were flashing, and the scream of the alarms pierced his ears. But he was the only one of the 20 or so people in the room who noticed. For the better part of the last 3 decades, he had been the only one who noticed anything. There was nothing the Templars could tempt or threaten him with to get him to cooperate. He had killed his beloved to keep her out of their grasping hands, and his son had seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. Joseph had taken care to befriend no one, so the Templars could not use one of his fellow inmates as leverage. He had never gone into the animus of his own free will, and soon enough he had paid the price. But he was a stubborn man, as his wife had loved to remind him with a smile in her voice. He clung to her memory, including that of how she had left this world, as if he were gripping a knife by the blade. It hurt, terribly, and it was because it hurt that he held on to it so tightly. Now he did not need to hold on to anything any longer. His son had come. Beyond any prayer or wish or hope or dream, Cal had found his father and understood him. His boy was strong. That was her in him, Joseph thought, and smiled a little as the world around him, this impossibly ordered world, began to crumble into chaos. He did not need to worry for Cal any longer. The boy... No, he was man-grown, and this man had chosen his own path. Joseph still held tightly to his blade, the one he had buried in his love's throat, the one that Cal had pressed to his, the one that Cal had returned to him. Events had come full circle now. Joseph heard them coming for him. He didn't need to see the foot-long steel knife in the guard's hands to know what would happen when they arrived. He could hear it in the quick sound of the man's determined stride. When his would-be killer was a step behind him, Joseph turned, calmly, casually, and drove his assassin's blade into the man's gut. A final gift from his boy. Joseph Lynch could at last, as his wife had done, die for the creed. 3 of them charged him now. It was almost laughable how easy it was to kill the first one and the second. But as was perhaps inevitable, the 3rd guard slipped behind him and thrust deep with the razor-sharp blade. The pain was a gift. It made Joseph feel alive for the first time in so very, very long. The guard pulled out the blade, and hot, red blood flowed down Joseph's side. My blood is not my own, he thought. And as Joseph Lynch, assassin, felt the last great coldness descend, and as his eyesight bled to black, he smiled. He was free. Sophia Rickon, scientist, Templar, stood rooted to the spot as the tableau of assassins seemed to waken. One by one they lifted their heads, gazing out from under their hoods at Cal, seeing him as Aguilar had. Cal looked at them in turn, connecting with each one. Were these his ancestors? Were they standing here in silent condemnation or in blessing? Only Cal knew, and one way or another her time with him was running out, and that knowledge pained her. One of the recently manifested images was smaller, slighter than some of the others. As Sophia watched, the figure lifted its head and regarded Cal as the others had done. Cal's mother, slender, elfin of feature, her hair a warm honey-red gold, regarded her son with a tremulous smile. The years seemed to fall off of Cal's face, as for the first time since Sophia had known him, and in a way she had known him for most of his life, he looked unguarded. He moved slowly, like a man in a dream, till he and the holographic image of his mother stood so close he could almost reach out and touch her. Sophia had never envied anyone as much as she envied Callum Lynch at this moment that did not in any way belong to her. This moment was too intimate. It was for these two and the other assassins, including the ones whose descendants even now were fighting in the rooms and the corridors. A Templar was not welcome. At that moment, another assassin lifted its head, but this one, while part of the circle, was not focused on Cal. It was turned toward her, a slender figure in a simple brown linen hood. Blue eyes, rimmed with kohl, met Sophia's evenly. A face Sophia knew, decorated with small, ornate tattoos, gazed at her. For a moment, Sophia couldn't breathe. The face beneath the plain brown hood was her own. She stood rooted to the floor, buffeted by waves of emotion, horror, joy, fear, wonder. She started to step closer, but her arm was seized by McGowan, who yanked her roughly away from the circle of assassins. "No!" Sophia screamed, struggling with all her strength against him. But McGowan was used to manhandling men as strong as Cal, and she was dragged away from the greatest mystery of her life, from the answers to questions she didn't even know she had, hauled off, kicking and flailing to the waiting helicopter, despair closing in on her like a smothering hand. Over the sounds of her own struggle, she heard the noise of fighting coming closer. The assassins were coming for Cal, their brother, and she was glad. Chapter 24. Lynn and Musa raced down the corridors, armed guards in hot pursuit. Without the smoke bombs to disorient the enemy, they were completely exposed and weaponless. At least there were plenty of distractions as they raced full tilt toward the Animus room. As planned, Emir had done what he could to trap as many guards in certain places while releasing the other inmates. All of them were, to one degree or another, allies, brethren, but only their small group of Musa, Emir, Lynn, and Nathan had stayed both sane and deeply in touch with their ancestors' memories. Only they and Callum Lynch. Musa had longer legs and pulled ahead, racing toward the Animus door. He heard movement behind him, and a quick glance showed him that a guard with a crossbow had darted out from one of the doors and was taking aim. She was quickly and efficiently brought down by Lynn, who seized both crossbow and the guard's baton. Lynn whirled, bringing the baton around in a brutal arc that smashed the guard's ribs. Musa jabbed at the intercom next to the door and yelled, "We're here, Emir!" "Opening now!" came Emir's voice through the intercom, and the silver doors parted. Musa didn't dash through immediately, waiting for Lynn, who was busy shooting crossbow bolts at charging guards. There was a commotion on one of the walkways over Lynn's head, and a flurry of movement. Musa grinned fiercely as Nathan leapt down lightly, and the three of them rushed into the Animus room as Emir slammed the door closed behind them. Cal was fully aware that he was still in the Animus. He understood that none of this was real, perhaps even less real than Aguilar's memories had been. He could see them, could hear them, but he couldn't smell his mother's lavender perfume, and although he had been able to touch, even kill the holographic images previously, he was afraid to reach for his mother, lest she dissolve like a fragile and perfect dream. Her words, like her face, were beautiful. "You're not alone, Cal," she assured him. "You never were." And oh, it was her voice. He could hear it now in his head, as he had heard it so many times, reciting the Robert Frost poem, deliberately, sweetly and subtly planting the importance of tending apples into the receptive brain of a well-loved, contented child. Her image continued speaking, and he drank in every word. "The past is behind us, but the choices we make live with us forever." She paused, her eyes searching his face. Then she did begin to quote, but it was not the childhood poem. "Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember, nothing is true." His voice was rough and thick with emotion. He hadn't thought he would remember the words Aguilar de Nerja had spoken. Perhaps he simply had never forgotten them. "Where other men are limited by morality or law, remember, everything is permitted." Her face was bright with pride, even as it was softened by sorrow. "We work in the dark to serve the light." Cal took a breath. "We are assassins." She turned slightly as an additional figure stepped forward into the circle. Cal felt another stab of pain and joy commingled as the new figure lifted its head. He knew the face beneath that cowl. It was his father. Not as Cal had last seen him, aged and stooped and soft and so close to broken, with milky eyes and a face twisted by years of internal torment. The man who stood before Cal was the Joseph Cal had remembered, would always want to remember, before the Templars had come, and his world had become a living hell. More than anything, Cal wanted to hold on to this moment. It had been the basis of both his sweetest dreams and most horrifying nightmares. He did not understand exactly what he was doing, and therefore could not prolong it. So it was that, one by one, in the same haunting silence with which they had arrived, the assassins turned and walked away, disappearing whence they had come. His parents were the last to leave. His mother gave him a final, loving look. Then she and his father turned away from him. Cal watched their retreating hooded shapes for as long as he could, but then his eyes blurred too much for him to see them clearly, and then they were gone. But as his mother had assured him, he was not alone. New brothers and sisters had come to him while she had been speaking to him, fighting for their lives to reach this room, this moment. He looked at them as he reached back a hand and plucked off the epidural unit, which had proven to be both torment and unexpected joyful gift. Unfastening the belt, with its hated Abstergo logo, by himself for the first time, gave him a sense of severance. "What now, pioneer?" challenged Musa. Musa, who had once dared him to jump, who, Cal now realized, had been analyzing him the moment he had stumbled, half-blind and terrified, into the rooftop gardens. Musa, who was Baptiste, as he was, in a way, Aguilar. Lynn stood beside him, silent, expectant. Even Nathan stood with Cal now, after what he had witnessed. "We fight," Cal said. They were pounding at the walls now, not with their batons, not anymore. The guards were wielding heavy, sharp blades, weapons that looked as though they could double as batons and swords. Emir had suspected it would come to this. The Templars might be thugs, without the grace and finesse of assassin training, but both Rickins were fiercely intelligent. They would know there was something different about the pioneer. They would no longer send their people to torment or bully or beat. They had now sent them to kill. There were so many, all hammering on the glass, trying to reach one lone inmate. 10, a dozen, 15. Emir swelled with pride, and the part of him that still felt as Yusuf had felt was content. Emir had done what he needed to. He had kept his word. He had held the Templars off long enough for his fellow assassins to break into the Animus room and find the pioneer. He had unleashed every other prisoner, so they would have a chance to fight for their lives, as assassins should, and not die slaughtered in a cage like beasts. The glass finally shattered, and they poured in, a wave of black and the glitter of their bright metal weapons, and still Emir fought them. In the end, It took 4 of them to hold him still enough for one of them to stab him. "This is better," he thought fleetingly, and Yusuf Tazim agreed. There were weapons all around them, weapons that had belonged to assassins down through the centuries, antiques, relics carefully removed from the immediacy and urgency of the present and kept in locked glass cabinets. "Where's Amir?" Cal asked as they went to the cabinets and began to select their choice of weapons. "Took control of the surveillance room," Nathan said. "Let me out! Let us all out!" And, Cal realized, had locked the door to the Animus room to buy them some time. He didn't ask when or how Amir intended on joining them. Cal knew, as he suspected the others knew as well, that Amir's choice to barricade himself in the surveillance room would almost certainly be a one-way trip. Some of the weapons were deeply familiar to the 4 assassins, though their physical hands had perhaps never held them. Cal strode up to a bow. A shiver ran down his spine as he recalled grasping it, nocking an arrow and letting fly. He smashed the glass with his blade and reached to pick it up, shaking off the broken shards. As he turned to find a quiver of arrows, he saw the others doing the same. Musa had found a most unusual gauntlet, one that had sharpened claws on the tips that moved like an extension of his fingers. Cal couldn't be sure in the dim, pulsing light, but he thought he saw that the metal of the claws was dulled by some sort of black substance. "My name is Baptiste, Voodoo Poisoner." Nathan went straight for a sword, a beautiful thing with a basket hilt of ornately swirling metalwork. He lifted it, smiling slightly, and cut the air with it a time or two. His whole body changed, going from gangly and frenetic to poised and aristocratic. On his other arm, he wore a hidden blade. And Lynn. Cal didn't even know what it was she grasped. Something leather with a hidden blade that sprang forth as smoothly as the day it was crafted, despite the passage of hundreds of years. It was only when she slipped it on her left foot and did a practice flying kick that he realized her hidden blade was on her shoe and how lethal it could be. Cal remembered Maria and her 2 unique blades, and felt the stab of another man's great loss as keenly as if it were his own. He and the others readied themselves for battle. Cal knocked his bow and pulled the long, slender arrow back smoothly, the sharpness of its tip undulled by time. Musa had his claw hand flexed and languid for now at his side, his other hand gripping a staff. Nathan seemed almost to have disappeared since he gripped the sword. He clearly was in the full grip of the bleeding effect, and Cal was glad of it. The memories of his ancestor fueled him, and there was steel in the boy's eyes as well as his hand. And Lynn. She grasped the crossbow she had taken from a guard during the flight to the Animus room. At her hip, she wore a short, double-edged sword, and on her feet, her unique blade. The enemy had been steadily banging on the door with no success. Then, all at once, the door slid open. Amir had fallen. The first 2 guards who rushed in, yelling, joined him in death, each felled by a different style of bow. Once Cal had released the arrow, he used the bow itself as a weapon, knocking one charging guard off balance with a smooth sweep and bringing the bow up to block the downward stab of a second. He turned, drawing another arrow in the same motion, fitted it to the string and let it fly. It pierced a 3rd guard through the eye. He dropped like a stone. Cal turned on the next assailant, kicking, punching, ducking, his body moving with an almost joyful ease. He had spent his whole life preparing for this moment, fighting alongside his brothers, and he was only now realizing it. Lynn utilized both her traditional weapons with deadly grace and speed. She leapt and executed a kick, the motion activating the blade in her boot. Her foot struck a guard under the chin, knocking him back and impaling him in the same efficient single strike. She landed, drawing her xian, and began beating back attacks from all sides, darting, springing up and dodging like a demon. It felt so good to be wielding it. It was an extension of her arm, as was the blade on her boot, and she finally felt she was home. One guard got his skull split. Another staggered back, his hand to his throat, as he impotently tried to stop the spurting crimson. A 3rd came at her with one of the baton blades, and she lopped off his hand with a single, almost bored motion. Lynn knew about the scientific reasons for the bleeding effect, but for her, in this moment, it felt more like an ancestor's spirit was dwelling in her body, sharing it for their common purpose. At this moment, Xiao Jun was happy. She was doing the thing she loved to do best, killing Templars and fighting alongside her brothers. There was a lot of rage inside Musa. Pure, cold, precise rage. Rage at injustices personal, and not at things that had pained his ancestor, at things that had broken his own heart. Like Lin, he too darted and dived, using his staff as familiarly as if he'd been practicing with the weapon his whole life. It felt so easy, so natural. He would bring it sweeping down low, knocking his foe off his feet, then dart forward for a quick swipe of the claw gauntlet. Musa didn't need to slice open an artery. Baptiste had said once, "A little nick will do the trick." And if that little nick put a Templar out of commission, and that little trick was that the man suffered agonizing torment as he spat froth and died in convulsions, well, that was just a little extra something that made the whole thing better. He whirled in anticipation of a blow, cracking a skull, and laughed. Nathan easily blocked a baton strike with his own edged steel, then deftly twisted his wrist to send the guard's weapon soaring uselessly across the room. The guard's side was left open for just an instant. Nathan was there, stabbing forward with his left hand. 8 inches of steel pierced the guard's heart, and he fell as Nathan dodged the blow of another guard, coming upward with a cruel grin on his boyish face. Damn, but he was good. His sword was an extension of his arm, slicing cleanly across another guard's throat. Nathan turned with military precision, seized another guard by the shoulder, and held him there as he ran him through. A sudden, white-hot pain shot through his right shoulder, and the grip on his sword loosened. A crossbow bolt protruded from his arm. Furious, Nathan grabbed the bolt and yanked it out. A guard charged him and managed to knock the sword out of his hands, sending it spinning through the air out of reach. He paid for it, though. Nathan used the bloody bolt as a weapon himself, stabbing it down into the man's shoulder and kicking him backwards. When the guard turned, Nathan fired his hidden blade and took great satisfaction in seeing its slim shape pierce the guard's throat. That was more like it. Despite the searing pain in his arm, Nathan seized another guard and, using the man's own baton as leverage, snapped his neck. He paused to catch his breath, staring down at the man, taking just a moment to congratulate himself. Even without weapons, a gentleman was always superior to. The blade piercing him from behind took him by surprise. It struck deep and true, and almost at once Nathan felt his body grow weak. He staggered, turning in all directions, took a couple of steps, and then fell. "Damn you, Duncan, you arrogant prick," Nathan thought. Then knew nothing more. Cal punched a guard, sending him staggering back, then snapped his wrists. The twin blades sprang free. He brought them slashing across the man's chest in an X motion. As the man fell to his knees, Cal plunged both blades into either side of his neck. Blood spurted, and the guard toppled to the floor. Cal looked up for his next target and saw a grey-clad form sprawled limply on the stone. Nathan's eyes were still wide. In death, he looked so young. But there would be time to mourn him later. At least, Nathan had died fighting the real enemies. He took a precious moment to assess what the other 2 remaining assassins were doing. Cal's torso was glistening with sweat, and he could see that Musa, implacably slicing with his clawed gauntlet, or seizing his enemies and apparently effortlessly snapping their necks, was sweating as well. Lynn, however, seemed to have not been physically affected by any of the battle. She had gotten hold of a thin, weighted rope and was now almost literally dancing through the fight, looking calm and in control, minimizing effort and maximizing kills as her rope tripped opponents, whipped around throats, or simply crushed skulls with a heavy ball at its end. The floor was littered with bodies. Cal did not waste time counting, but there were easily a dozen, perhaps twice as many fallen Templars. No doubt more living ones would be coming to replace them soon, unless the other prisoners had assisted Cal and the others by dispatching them. As he caught his breath, he heard a distinctive sound from high above him. The battle focus left him. He had been transfixed earlier, when somehow he had found himself surrounded by so many assassins from bygone centuries. But part of him had also been aware of what else was going on around him. He had heard Alan Rickon say that he had gotten what he needed, and order that the facility be purged. He had seen Sophia offer up resistance and been dragged away. They knew where the apple was hidden. And the sound coming from above him was the sound of helicopters about to depart for Seville Cathedral to claim the Apple of Eden. Cal sprang before he even consciously chose to do so, leaping onto the great mechanical arm that had been the source of so much torment and so many blessings at once, climbing up it with monkey-like agility. Below him, Lynn took out a final guard, and then jumped up onto the arm as well, following him. Rickon had to be stopped. The fate of the world quite literally depended on it. He reached the top, his progress stymied by the enormous circle of the skylight. Furious, fearful, Cal activated the blade on his right hand and punched the glass of the central circle. It shattered, falling in glinting pieces around him, decorating his body with tiny scarlet slices. Cal ignored the pain, leaping upward and balancing on the large, gently curving dome. The helicopters had already left. Cal gave chase, leaping from the dome onto another part of the roof, running as fast as he could, but he was too late. A minute more, perhaps even 20 seconds, and he could have caught them. Instead, alone on the rooftop of the Abstergo Foundation Rehabilitation Center, Callum Lynch watched the helicopters full of Templars angle off into the cloud-filled sky. Chapter 25. Sophia had never been to the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Sea, better known as Seville Cathedral, before. She had seldom ventured forth from the Madrid facility, and then only when it was pertinent to her research. Hitherto the cathedral had not been. She knew about it, of course. One could not be a Templar without being aware of the role played by the major medieval cathedrals. Once, religion had been an important part in the Templars' quest for control and direction of humanity's destiny. Rumour had it that in 1401, when it was decided to build a church to replace the mosque that had stood on the site of the cathedral now occupied, the members of the cathedral chapter vowed, "Let us build a church so beautiful and so grand that those who see it finished will think we are mad." Sophia suspected if they had lived to see that day when it was completed in 1506, they would have deemed their request met. Seville Cathedral remained one of the largest in the world, and it was breathtakingly beautiful. The central nave rose to a staggering height of 42 metres. Its lavish gilding and the large stained-glass windows bathed the interior in a warm, colour-spotted glow. Sophia supposed that many would find a sense of peace here, in the quiet beauty with the scent of old incense permeating the wood. But she found none. Her heart was heavy and aching, with guilt and fear and anger. She had not said a word to her father since they had departed the rooftop of the Abstergo Foundation Rehabilitation Center. She had watched as the rest of her team also piled into helicopters, choppered to safety. Sophia knew better than to think it was an act of kindness on her father's part to include them in the evacuation. She had heard him order McGowan to secure the Animus. For him, the people that operated it were part and parcel of a machine that had proven singularly valuable and would continue to be so. Retraining new people would take time and money. Things were as simple as that in Alan Rickon's world. They flew straight from the facility to the cathedral, radioing ahead and explaining that, yes, it was indeed absolutely imperative that the cathedral be closed down upon their arrival and that the tomb of Christopher Columbus be opened. And no, it could not wait for the Archbishop to return to oversee the process. One of the bishops already on site would have to suffice, and by the way, Her Excellency would also be arriving. Could she please be accommodated as was appropriate to her position? In silence, the doctors Rickon had travelled, and now in silence they walked along the marble flooring. Sophia followed several paces behind her father. No one noticed or cared. It was Alan Rickon whom they knew and respected. Sophia was little more than an afterthought to the bishops as her father was greeted and shown inside. Columbus's body had travelled almost as much in death as it had in life. His remains had been moved from Valladolid, Spain, where he died in 1506, to Seville. In 1542, they were relocated to colonial Santo Domingo, the future Dominican Republic, and rested there until 1795, when they were transferred to Havana, Cuba. It wasn't until 1899 that Columbus was interred here, in a tomb as splendid and ornate as the rest of the cathedral. It was held aloft not by angels or pillars, but by allegorical figures representing the kingdoms of Spain during his life, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Leon. Sophia halted, letting her father go up to speak with the bishop. It did not escape Sophia that, although he lay in the most extravagant surroundings imaginable, Christopher Columbus had died in poverty, a fate he could so easily have escaped by selling the apple to the Templars. They were precisely on time. One of the bishops was climbing down from the tomb, carefully cradling a small, ornate metal box next to his body. Sophia inhaled swiftly. This was not the same box she had seen in the simulation. Was it possible that the apple she had spent her life pursuing had vanished, or been stolen during Columbus's post-life adventuring? Part of her, absurdly, madly, traitorously, hoped it had. The bishop handed the box to her father, who stared at it for a long moment without touching it. I should be the one opening it, Sophia thought. It was like ashes in her mouth. She had spent her life working toward this moment, had permitted her father to perform an atrocity in the name of this apple. She had told Cal she was his protector, but in the end she had abandoned him. Her father's callous words floated back to her. We've merely abandoned them to their own inexorable fate. And her father, who had forced her to abandon Cal, would be the one granted all the honour. Sophia heard the click-click of high heels behind her, the sound echoing in the vast space. She turned to see Chairwoman Ellen Kay standing beside her. Your Excellency, Sophia said, inclining her head slightly in respect. Kay did not initially acknowledge the greeting. The two women stood watching as Alan Rickon slowly opened the small metal casket. The glory will go to your father, Kay said unexpectedly, but we both know who found it. Sophia turned to look at her, surprised and gratified. She had met the chairwoman before, but Kay had never seemed to take any interest in her. Now the older woman graced her with a smile, reserved, as Ellen Kay ever was, but sincere. Your time will come, my child. Then the chairwoman of the Council of Elders of the Templar Order walked up to stand beside the CEO of Abstergo Industries, and together they looked upon the apple of Eden, while Sophia Rickon, scientist and discoverer, looked on from a distance, unwelcome, unacknowledged, and unwanted. And as she stood there, solitary and ignored, her thoughts crept back, unbidden, to the woman in the hood who wore her face. Sophia was nominally English, having been born in England and lived there for the first few years of her life, but in her adulthood she had seldom returned. It was too damp and cloudy for her liking. When she was a little girl, she often asked why the sky cried so much, and if it was because it had lost its mamma too. She never shook that association. As far as she was concerned, it was either raining there, about to rain, or had just finished raining. Tonight it was the latter. The road, black and wet, glistened in the lights of the busy night street as her car pulled up directly across from the future scene of her father's performance, Templar Hall. Many similar cars were doing likewise. Templars from all over the world would be gathering here for the momentous occasion. Politicians, religious figures, captains of industry, nearly 2,000 would be present. Father will have a full house tonight, Sophia thought sourly. She stepped out of the car, closed the door, and crossed the street to the huge stone building which exuded power in its strong lines, but was still beautiful. In one hand she clutched a sheaf of paper, crumpled from her tight grip. She wore a conservative dress, high heels and a cape, all black. It seemed appropriate. Security, of course, was out in full force. There were cameras everywhere, metal detectors, sniffer dogs, pat-down stations. Sophia was greeted immediately. After a cursory and apologetic inspection, she was ushered inside. She located her father in one of the side cloakrooms. He was busy donning traditional Templar robes over his smart Savile Row suit, examining himself in the mirror. He caught her reflection and smiled fleetingly at her as he adjusted his impressive cravat. "How do I look?" As always, he was fiddling with his cufflinks. She did not offer to help. Sophia took in the perfect greying hair, the distinguished lines in his face, the crisp fold of the maroon and black of his hooded robe, the classic square red cross on the medallion on his chest. "Like a Templar," she replied. He either did not catch the ice in her voice, or more likely did not care. "A world without crime," he said. "They'll give you a Nobel Peace Prize for this. You'd better start writing your speech." "I've read yours." This time he did catch it. His motion slowed and his eyes met hers in the mirror. "And?" Sophia lowered her eyes to the sheaf of pages she had clutched so tightly, repulsed all over again at the words in front of her, and read aloud, "If we eradicate free will, we eradicate the assassins, a cancer that has menaced society for centuries." Her voice caught on the word cancer. "Violence is a disease, like cancer," she had told Cal. "And like cancer, we hope to control it one day." For her, the cancer was violence. For her father, it was the assassins themselves. She flipped through the rest of the speech angrily. "Mongrels. Vermin." "It's not my best work, but it gets the point across," he answered. "Your point is genocide," Sophia snapped. "It's a new beginning." His voice was calm, rational, and his mien was pleasant as he turned to regard her. "You've done a remarkable thing, Sophia. You don't see it now, but you will, one day. All these centuries we've been looking for solutions. You, my child, you've eliminated the problem." She had known he despised the assassins. They had taken her mother. She too had grown up abhorring their brotherhood. She never wanted another family to suffer as her family had, or as Cal's family had. It was strange how the child of Templars and the child of assassins had so much suffering in common. Perhaps more than Sophia had ever realized. Sophia had longed to end that suffering, been desperate to end it, so desperate that she hadn't seen or had refused to see what had been right in front of her for her entire life. I did this to save lives," she whispered, so choked by the horror of the revelation she could barely speak. "Not everything deserves to live," her father said. She flinched, thinking of the last assassin face she had seen. He glanced at his watch and headed for the door. He paused and quirked an eyebrow when she didn't follow. In a daze, she forced herself to move, forced herself to walk beside him as they went down the hall. Robed Templars, some with their hoods up, most with them down, brushed past her. She tried to work through it, unable to quite understand how twisted her dream had become. "So, my program has brought order to society for the first time," her father said, completing her sentence for her in a way she never would have done. "We are witnessing the birth of a golden era. Bought with the blood of untold millions, nothing good can come of such a birth." The guilt was so profound, Sophia almost stumbled. "I'm accountable for this." "You've already been accounted for. Our work belongs to the elders. This is their finest hour." Sophia couldn't believe it. Had he actually misunderstood her, or was this yet another dismissal? "I've been so stupid," she thought, "so very blind." "You lied to me." It wasn't an angry retort, flung by a rebellious teenager against a controlling parent. It was the simple truth. He had lied, not just about how her decades of passionate research would be utilized, but about everything. About what it meant to be an assassin, and what it meant to be a Templar. There was the faintest hint of softening in his patrician face as he gazed down at her. His voice was kinder than she had heard it in years, but the words were sharper than an assassin's hidden blades. I've always known that in your heart you were a scientist first, a Templar second. And for him, that justified every single thing he had done to her since his wife and her mother had been taken from them both. Sophia stared up at him, sick. "Your recent work has impressed us much," he said, "but it has confirmed our belief that mankind cannot be redeemed." And there it was. "So," her voice was ice-cold and steel-hard, "you've thought of everything." "Not quite. My speech, it could do with one of your elegant openings." For a moment, she simply stared, aghast that he was occupied with something so trivial when they were discussing the absolute elimination of not just the assassins, but of free will itself. Then she understood. He wanted her with him. Not just as an asset, he already had that. He could, and had, used her and her brilliance as it suited him. He didn't need that. He didn't need her editorial skills, her elegant words. The comment was an olive branch. Alan Rickon wanted his little girl truly on his side, as an ally, a believer. She recalled his comment to her a few days ago. "Do I look old to you?" No one lived forever, not even Master Templars, and he wanted his only child beside him to carry on his legacy with a willing heart. He had never been a demonstrative father, and whatever warmth and paternal affection had once existed had all but vanished when her mother gasped out her last breath. This was how he showed regard. This was how he showed love. But he had shown her something else tonight as well, had been showing her something else time after time after time. It had taken his endorsement of genocide for her to fully grasp the depths of Alan Rickon's inhumanity. He was now offering what he could, and she could see it in the slight look of wary hope on his face. But it was much too little, and far, far too late. She had the perfect, eloquent opening, spoken by the perfect person. Sophia looked her father full in the face and quoted, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." A muscle twitched in his cheek. That was all. "Not sure I could make that work." A voice floated to them through the closed doors, interrupting the spell that held them captive in their dysfunctional, intimate connection. "It is with great pleasure tonight that I introduce the architect of our ancient order's future. Please welcome Grand Master Templar and CEO of Abstergo Industries and Foundation, Dr. Alan Rickon." The doors swung open, and light streamed into the dim corridor. Her father did not give her another glance, but turned and strode in, walking to the podium as if nothing, absolutely nothing, had occurred while he was waiting outside to be introduced. Chapter 26. Thunderous applause and cheers filled the room, issuing from nearly 2,000 Templar throats. The spotlights followed him as he strode to the podium as if he were a rock star. Sophia supposed he was. Her father's pleasant voice flowed out as the crowd's cheering died down, and they leaned in, eager for his words. "For centuries," Rickon said, "we have been at war with an enemy who believes that individual needs are more important than the peace of mankind. With the recovery of the apple, the time is upon us when we may eliminate the assassin threat forever." More applause, more excitement. Sophia had thought she could not feel more wretched, but now she realized that what she despised in her father's attitude was not the exception among the Templar. It was the rule. "We are now in possession of a genetic roadmap to humanity's instincts." Sophia squinted against the light, suddenly feeling nauseous. It was too harsh, too white. She felt exposed and vulnerable. Like a wounded animal, all she wanted was to seek darkness, stillness, and solitude. To lick her wounds, and perhaps someday recover, if such a thing were even possible. "Any impulse towards independence, resistance, or rebellion will be crushed. Any predisposition that might oppose our march of progress can now be eradicated," Rickon went on. Sophia went out into the main entrance area, the droning voice of her father and the click of her heels on the floor the only sounds. Up ahead, against the stained glass, movement caught her eye. Sophia thought it was another Templar in his traditional robes, perhaps a latecomer. Then she realized that the shape did not move like a Templar. Her father's speech of hatred and genocide couched in comfortable platitudes fluttered to the floor. Sophia froze in her tracks as he approached her. She couldn't see his face beneath the cowl of the hood, but she didn't need to. She had watched him move, had learned to recognize the lithe, rhythmic flow of his limbs like a big cat. She had seen it in the animus room, and she was seeing it here, now, in a place where it was the least likely, and those most dangerous, to be. She knew she ought to be terrified to see him. This was a man she had captured and imprisoned, to whom she had exposed all manner of torment. But all that was going through her mind was how unspeakably relieved she was that he had survived. He stopped 3 feet away. Now she could see him, see the blonde red growth of beard on his strong jaw, his unblinking eyes that, even as a prisoner helpless before her, always seemed to stare straight into her. Sophia was having trouble breathing, from fear, grief, or desire, or all of the emotions striking at once in a heart that had been guarded against them since earliest childhood. She wasn't sure. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say to him. What came out was, "All I have to do is shout." She could not tell if it was a threat or a warning. Once everything had been so clear, so straightforward in her life, so orderly. And this man, and all he had taught her, about himself, about the assassins, about Sophia Ricken, plunged everything into unknowable, beautiful, terrifying chaos. Still, she did not shout, and he knew she wouldn't. He trusted her, despite everything. Cal's eyes were full of what looked like sympathy. He should hate her, but he didn't. He spoke softly, as he always did. "I'm here to help you, and you're here to help me." Sophia flinched. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them spill. Once she had said those words to him. Once she had meant them. "I can't help you any more." Not him. Not humanity. She couldn't even help herself. "What about those great plans? Cure violence, combat aggression." Was he making fun of her, tormenting her, trying to shame her? No, that was not Cal's way. That was her father's way. "That's not going to happen." Sophia's voice and heart both broke at the truth and despair in the words. He continued to regard her steadily, almost sadly. Then he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her heart leapt in her chest. Again, she could not name the emotion. She had been disconnected from them for too long. Was he going to kiss her or kill her? And which did she want him to do? But he did nothing. He did not even touch her. "You started this, Sophie. You don't get to walk away." How did he know? How did he know that was the nickname her mother had given her? Wildly, she again thought of the woman who looked exactly like her, wearing an assassin's hood. "What are we to each other, Cal?" "We both know what happens next," he whispered, adding, echoing her father's words, "Not everything deserves to live." And she did. She knew exactly what he would do, and why. He would be justified in it. The assassins did not deserve the fate about which her father pontificated in the next room to a gleeful, unnaturally detached audience. Cal did not deserve to have been abandoned like an old shirt that no longer fit. She could not blame him for wanting revenge, but yet his expression was not that of a man obsessed and hungering for vengeance. Callum Lynch wanted something quite different. He wanted justice, something that somehow the assassins, thralls to their emotions in a way the Templars found so repugnant, understood better than their age-old enemy. Her father. His contempt, his casual dismissal of millions of lives. Alan Ricken could die 1,000 times and it would still not be justice for that. She and Cal had been far too similar, despite their differences, not to have sensed a connection when he had first arrived. Like her father, Cal wanted Sophia with him, but he wanted her for all the things her father and the Templar order he represented would desire to see crushed in Sophia's spirit. Her fire, her curiosity, her compassion. "I can't do this," she whispered. Something inside her shattered at the words. "I have been broken all my life. I can live with being a little more broken." Cal's gaze remained kind as his eyes flickered down to her lips and then back up to her eyes. "Yes, you can." Slowly, slowly he leaned forward. Sophia closed her eyes. Cal did not smell of cologne and starch and fine wool suits as her father did. He smelled of sweat and leather and the cleanliness of the evening's rain. And for a moment, Sophia wanted nothing more than to run away from the Templars and their order and their lies, from her father who embodied the very worst of them, to find out who the woman was who had gazed at her, surrounded by images of assassins at the base of a broken animus. But that gulf was too wide to cross. Not even an assassin's leap could clear it. Her father was a monster, but he was her father, the only one Sophia had. Her order was horrifyingly wrong, but it was all she had known. Cal sensed it, moving past her silent but for a faint rustle of fabric, and she was left alone, shaking and more lost than ever. Sophia tried to calm herself, to breathe deeply. Her father's voice floated out to her. "It is not to ourselves, but to the future that we must give glory. A future purged of the assassin's creed." Purged. The same word he had used when he had forsaken the Foundation facility and instructed the guards there to kill the prisoners, the patients in cold blood. Sophia blinked, feeling dazed, drugged, as if she were swimming toward wakefulness out of the drugged sleep of grief and disillusionment and shattered dreams almost too great to be borne. She still could not move as the cheering continued. Her father had taught her chess when she was young. The game did not call to her with the same tug as it did probing the mysteries of science, so she had not played in years. But a German term floated back to her now. Zugzwang. The direct translation was compulsion to move. It described a situation where a player was compelled to move even though a move would put them at a disadvantage. Sophia now was compelled to move, to either warn her father or choose to remain silent and let what would unfold. Assassin or Templar? The tears that had threatened all evening finally spilled down her flushed cheeks. As they slipped down, she made no effort to stop them and was not even sure why or for whom she wept. "Ladies and gentlemen," her father said, and she had heard that tone in his voice before. The grandeur of it, the booming resonance tinged just so with excitement. "I give you the apple." The crowd exploded. Sophia had never heard so reserved an audience give vent to so furious, so thrilled an expression of approval. Still, she stood as if she was carved of the same stone as the building. She couldn't move to join Cal. She couldn't move to stop him. And then the screaming started. Time slowed to a bizarre crawl, the sounds of panic about her muffled and distant. She did not scream. There was nothing to be gained by it. Templars shoved past her in their maddened crush to escape, their glee at the thought of killing assassins in a craven fashion completely erased by the terror caused by a single assassin boldly striking in their very midst. She moved, still dazed, into the auditorium, against the flood of fleeing, hooded Templars, their robes flapping as they stampeded towards safety, shoving past Sophia. She felt one of them brush her arm, smelled sweat and leather, and then he was gone. He could have killed indiscriminately, taken down several others of the ancient enemy, but he had come only for one man, and one thing. Sophia ascended the stage, now empty of everything save the corpse of her father. His killer was skilled and had known exactly how to cut so that death would be as swift as possible. It was more mercy, more restraint than Rickon himself had ever displayed. Blood was still flowing, forming a puddle beneath her father's cooling body. Sophia's vision was blurred by tears, but her gaze travelled from his face to his right hand. The apple was gone. In its place, her father's dead hand cupped a small green apple. Zugzwang. Something snapped inside Sophia. "I did this," she said. It was not browbeating. It was the simple truth. She had been complicit, even willing, in every inexorable step that had led to this moment, with her father bleeding out on the blue carpet of the auditorium. She had burned to impress this man, to win his love with her intelligence and her discoveries. She had pushed to locate the apple for him, and had succeeded. She had been too weak to defy her father when he had revealed his true nature to her, and she had failed to warn him when she knew an assassin was coming for him. "I will retrieve the apple for the elders," she heard herself saying, as McGowan stepped beside her. She couldn't tear her eyes from the sight before her, not her father's dead face or surprised eyes, but the apple he held. It had not been necessary. It had been a message to the Templars, one Cal had known Sophia would likely be the first to discover. Whatever Rickon had done in the past, he was her father, the only parent she had. She was an orphan now. Cal had taken not just a man as he was in that moment when he died, but all that Alan Rickon might possibly ever become. He had taken away any chance Sophia might have for closeness, for understanding, for respect for the man whose DNA flowed through her. There would be no chance either for her to question her father about the assassin who looked so very like his daughter. Callum Lynch had ended Rickon's present, and his future had disappeared along with it, vanishing like one of the holographic images in an animus simulation. And that his daughter could not forgive. "Lynch," she said, "I want for me." Sophia felt a prickle along her spine. Others were watching her. The tears presently flooding her eyes spilled over onto her ashen face, but no more were coming. Her grief was slowing, congealing, turning cold like her father's spilled blood. She turned slowly, knowing who she would see. Ellen Kay stood, gazing down at Sophia. With her stood several of the elders. Kay's hands were clasped calmly in front of her. Sophia thought about the day when the older woman had stood beside her as they regarded Rickon gazing down at the apple. "Your time will come, child. It is not to ourselves, but to the future that we must give glory," Kay said. No one stopped Sophia as she moved through the crowd, with McGowan glowering at anyone who might try. Outside, the world still went on as usual. It did not know, yet, how enormously it had changed. But it would, soon. Sophia heard the wail of approaching sirens and steeled herself. There would be much to do, going forward. Everyone would be questioned, the incident examined. A plausible story would be fabricated and released to the press about the tragic demise of CEO Alan Rickon. She raised her eyes to the night sky, not seeing the clouds or the shy stars trying to peep through the soft grey. She saw the tops of buildings and knew that the man who might have been her love, but who was now her enemy, was out there among them. But that was all right. The Templars would find him. They would find them all. Epilogue. The assassin stood upon the roof of a building. Below him spread the River Thames. Night embraced him. He had discarded the Templar formal robe once it had no longer served as camouflage, and now wore a long overcoat of dark blue wool that protected against the chill of a London late autumn. He was not alone. His brothers and sisters stood beside him on the roof. There were more out there. As if in solidarity with him, the assassin caught the dark silhouette of a raptor against the grey, clouded sky. An eagle? He did not know. Perhaps. But he could see with its eyes, and in his own way, as he had believed he could as a boy, he could fly. Callum Lynch took a deep breath, spread out his arms, and leapt.